Welcome to Content with Character, the weekly podcast that'll give you the momentum you need to create content with more ease, clarity, and laughter. I'm your host, content copywriter Emily Aborn, and I'm all about unconventional marketing approaches. I believe in your big ideas, and I'm excited to help you share them in a way that's distinctly you. The curiosity gap is defined as the space between what they want or need to know and what they already know. When we introduce a little curiosity in our content and our marketing, this gap can create a sense of intrigue, interest, a desire to lean in and know more. This episode will help you understand the unique power of curiosity in your marketing and give you actionable ways to spark more of it throughout your content. Did you know that it is almost a birthday month over here for the Content with Character podcast? I'm about to hit my 1-year mark, which is, in a word, very, very exciting. Oh, wait, that was a lot more than just one word. May is also, in addition to being the podcast's birthday month, it's also my own birthday month. So it's just going to be a good time all around over here, I think. But before I get ahead of myself and start thinking about what we're talking about in May, because I'm also very excited about that, let me tell you. But let's just focus on today. Today's topic of curiosity marketing, which is a super fun way to think of content creation and add in that little bit of sizzle for that little bit of spice. For both of you, for you, the creator, and the person listening, reading, and interacting with your content. And as per usual, there's a story time involved in today's episode because the way I even discovered this concept is a little wild. But I think what happened is that I listen to lots of podcasts, I read lots of books, and I talk to a lot of people. And I would hear people often refer to themselves as curious or curious-minded or endlessly curious, right? And despite having no shortage of questions about so many things of my own, I never actually would have described myself as curious. I just thought that word curious or curiosity was reserved for people who walk around bug-eyed and in a world of the world around them is just so awe-inspiring. You know, the people who can barely let you finish a thought before they're asking you that next question. So that's kind of what I thought when I thought of a curious person. I heard people use the word curiosity or talk about being curious, and I just didn't entirely relate. I don't know if you remember that book series, Curious George, but I used to love those books growing up. And, in retrospect, I've read some things about the man in the yellow hat that maybe implies he was not being so kind to poor George. I mean, I'm pretty sure George was in captivity, but moral dilemmas aside with the whole concept, Curious George was this little monkey who got into all sorts of trouble by following his curiosity wherever it led. And so I think that when I thought of being curious, I assumed it just meant you caused a ruckus all the time. Everywhere you went, you were just kind of getting into trouble, which I definitely am a rule breaker, but I'm not really a troublemaker. I wasn't the kid asking my mom, why this, why that, why is the sky blue, or asking my mom a zillion questions. I don't think. And as an adult, I don't tend to go down endless Reddit rabbit holes or have 5 million tabs open on my browser when I find something of interest. And even in school, I know that I loved learning. I loved reading. I was a voracious learner and reader, but I was very focused. And so looking back, I'm able to now that my awareness has been raised, I'm able to see a common theme, a common thread in the types of things that I was interested in, the types of things I was curious about. So while I did not consider myself curious per se, turns out I was kind of overgeneralizing how curiosity manifests itself, and it was quite off, I might say. It was actually in a conversation on my She Built This podcast, which I believe was exactly a year ago, around this time, I was in a conversation with my friend Karen Kenny, and she brought to my attention that there are actually 4 different types of curiosity. And that means that curiosity shows up for us in different ways. So once I discovered that, once I learned that, oh, I am curious, I'm very curious in these 2 distinct, and I have this very prominent flavor of curiosity, then my eyes started to open and I just realized all of the different ways that curiosity has actually been a pull through my entire life, like literally taking me to the next step, to the next step, to the next step. Where I am today is really in large part, and I'm sure many of us can relate to this, it is a lot of curiosity that got me here, right? Curiosity along the way. And that's what curiosity really does. It's like this internal, it's hard to describe, but it's like an internal engine, like our own little personal breadcrumb path that we're like following, like the next breadcrumb and the next breadcrumb and the next breadcrumb. And it's just like this kind of like force, this excitement propelling us forward. So learning all of that, I actually spent an entire month focused specifically on curiosity on the She Built This podcast. I was showing, how we can bring it into our lives. All of my conversations were focused on that, how we can bring it into our writing, how we can bring it into our marketing. So I spent a lot of time thinking about curiosity and its implications in my life, and it's also its implications in my business. I became so curious about curiosity itself as a phenomenon. Like, what is it? Who has it? How can we get more of it? What are the benefits? Are you born with it? And did it really kill the cat? So now, after kind of just, honestly, barely scratching the surface of the power of curiosity as a piece of our content and marketing, as the power it has in our lives, and also the ability to strengthen us as business owners, I finally sat down and decided to create today's episode. And before we get into it, I just want to really quickly introduce myself in case you're new here, or maybe you are curious about who I am. So I'm Emily Aborn. As aforementioned, I'm a content copywriter with over 100 industries of writing experience and a decade as an entrepreneur. My current curiosities, say that 10 times fast, my current curiosities lie in how a single decision can change your life and the people around you. I also am super curious about how to get to know people better and create deeper connections. So those are kind of the things I'm interested in right now and diving in on. And if you want to get on my website and also connect with me on all the social places, it's just emilyaborn.com. So let's start today by clearly answering what curiosity has to do with our marketing. There's actually a term called curiosity marketing. And I think it's important to talk about what that is, and also more importantly, why it matters to you, why it matters to us. Curiosity marketing is the ability to create a sense of interest, a sense of intrigue. It is a type of marketing that creates something where people want to lean in and know more. Now, typically, because we're talking about marketing, this is going to be like your ideal client or, who you're sharing your content with. But it's just this desire to lean in and know more. Curiosity marketing pulls people towards your brand, towards you. It attracts them to want to learn more about who you are, about your products, about what you offer. And I'll say this, it's a noisy, getting ever noisier online space out there. And what I love about curiosity is that it's not pushing people to do something. It's kind of inviting. It's engaging, surprising, grabbing their attention. And in the end, the result is that it's going to take them to places that they never even thought possible. It's going to take them to new solutions, new possibilities, new concepts, new thoughts, new connections, right? So it really is a powerful force, I think, driving us as humans from the time we were children. We search for meaning and purpose and knowledge and answers and next steps and learning about others and the world around us, and all of those things, that drive, that search is a part of curiosity. And we can use it in our marketing and in our content too, as a way to invite people in, to explore, to take action, to discover more, right? It really creates this like desire to be a part of what you're offering, to learn more about you, and to work with you. And so what I want to share with you in this episode is not just that unique power that curiosity has, which I've talked a little bit about already, but also actionable ways you can use it in your content and marketing, things that you want to avoid when trying to create curiosity, and hopefully maybe like even a new insight or two about yourself and about your own curiosity too. So remember how I said at the beginning, I had this idea in my mind of what a curious person looked like. I thought curiosity only looked one way. Well, there are actually 4 distinct types of curiosity and 4 types of curious people. I'm sure there are more, just for the record. This is not my original concept. You can find this far and wide on the internet. Like I said, I first learned about it from Karen Kenny when she guested on my She Built This podcast last year. But there are 4 widely accepted types of curiosity. And there's a great article which kind of shows, it breaks it down by like population. I'm sure it obviously is a limited sample size or whatever, but I did include the link to that article in the show notes so that you can kind of, if you're curious about curiosity like I was, you can read more. So the 4 types are the fascinated. Now, this is about 28% of the population. And this is a type of person who enjoys an eclectic array of information sources. They may like reading a lot of different things. They may have broad interests. These folks tend to look at more websites. They tend to be more independent. They may have their hands in a lot of different things. So maybe they call themselves or appear to be multi-passionate, right? We hear that term a lot. Typically this person, and this is not always, but typically they're interested in like what's going on, like politics, news, current events, that kind of thing. And then in general, more things just easily capture this person's attention. More things easily inspire awe. And more things are, fascinating, for lack of a better word, more often. The second type, which is about 25% of the population, is the empathizer. This person loves and finds joy in learning about people, social constructs, psychology, sociology, anthropology, connection, what makes people tick, how to make them feel seen, supported, heard, behavior, all of that stuff. They often use social media more, but it's not always just to post. It's often to see what other people have to say, see what other people are feeling, and they really like people watching. Anyone else raise your hand? Can you make an entire day of people watching? I love people watching, observing people living in their natural habitats, in their natural environment. That's the empathizer. The third type is the problem solver. And once again, this is about 28% of the population. They're not so much in the curiosity game for the joy and sensation of it, although that might be actually a bit of an overgeneralization because I have a lot of problem solver in me, and I tell you what, it is exciting. But most of the time, they're really in it for that end goal or the desired outcome or solving problems. They tend to have fewer interests than the fascinator, but they do tend to feel a greater sense of control, actually, in life overall, and a greater sense of accomplishment and a greater sense of independence. These are the folks that love figuring out a puzzle. And also the people whose brain maybe doesn't stop until like whirling around and around and around on something until they've solved the problem, until they've checked those boxes, figured out a solution. And they really love tying up those loose ends. And then 19% of the population, if you can believe this, is the avoider. That's just kind of low curiosity overall, reads less, probably asks less questions, and they actually report more stress in their day-to-day life, which I found interesting. So my question for you is, which one are you? I would venture to say, if you're listening to this, pretty much if you're listening to like any podcast, you're probably not an avoider, or at least not very much of one. And here's the other thing. We all have little sprinkles of all of these, right? Like depending. You probably, though, have 2, and then you're also going to lean more heavily on 1. But I'll tell you my top 2. I don't really know if I can decide between the 2. But my top two, I'm an empathizer. And like, as an example, I'm so obsessed with this book that I'm reading right now called How to Know a Person. It literally was written for me. I absolutely love it. It's blowing my mind. And I'm also definitely a bit problem solver. And I do feel, if I had to add one more thing into this, I'm like, can we please have the contrarian or the rule breaker or the rebellious curious person? Because haven't you seen the kind of person that you're like, they're not really curious. They're just trying to create a stir or cause trouble. I don't know. Maybe that's somewhere in all of these. Another good question to ask yourself after you've kind of said, okay, I know myself, after knowing thyself, which type of curious person does your business or your marketing or your content or you as a business owner, which one do you find yourself speaking to most often? Or who do you tend to work with as clients? Are you able to kind of like see any sorts of patterns there? Because that can also help you know how to talk to them a little bit too. So, all right. Now we're going to get into it. So let's talk about the curiosity gap, and then we'll really get through some of those tangibles on creating curiosity, bringing in sparks of interest, and piquing curiosity into your content. So the curiosity gap is the space. It is the space between what we want to know or need to know and what we actually know. Now, the goal is actually to have a little bit of that gap. So as content creators, we want to add the curiosity gap. However, we don't want to make it too confusing. So I love telling this story. Last year, I don't remember when, but we were having our family over and I decided I was going to make my delicious butternut squash soup. It's like so packed full of flavor. It's so good. It's easy. You can just do it in the crock pot and everybody always loves it. Well, this particular time, I decided I was going to make it a little like spicier. So not only did I just add ginger, which is what I usually do, I also added jalapenos, cayenne pepper, probably a little curry. I don't know. I went to town on the spices. And let me just tell you, it was not just spicy, it was too hot to even palate. Like everybody took one bite and was like, no, thank you. Because you couldn't even taste the flavor of the soup. Like your mouth was just burning instantly. Your body was hot, right? So we don't want that. Like that's a little too much spice, a little too much sizzle. We want to create a perfect kind of blend where, yes, there's curiosity. It's just there's a little bit of heat, right? But it's not a 5-alarm fire in your mouth. It's not making you panic. Like we don't want confusion when we're trying to create curiosity. So let's get into actually like, how do you do that? How do you create that curiosity gap without going overboard? Here's a great place to start. Start with this question. And I will say that you have to be honest with yourself. You maybe will ask other people, but ask yourself if you would follow you. Are you interesting? Are you talking about yourself all the time? Are you stuck in promoting yourself all the time? Like, is it just constant self-promotion? Is it boring? Is it actually interesting? So would you follow you? One of the guests I had on during that month of curiosity, and I'll make sure that all of these episodes I'm mentioning are linked in the show notes. One of those guests was Mignon Fogarty, host of the Grammar Girl podcast. She shared something she does, which I loved. She does a yearly review with her own content, and she asks herself, would I still follow me? And I just love that. And the other way you can do this, if you're not able to give yourself a clear picture or honest answer, is to ask friends who care about you and can give you like really honest, loving feedback. And I would also help you with that in a strategy session if you want somebody with from a professional lens. Okay. Number 2, another great way to bring in curiosity is through things like our subject lines. So I'm thinking of like the ways we get people to lean in initially. Like, maybe we only have 1 or 2 seconds with them and we're trying to get them into leaning into our content. So a couple ways to do this. Some people call these quote unquote hooks. I really despise the term hooks because I feel like it's like shiesty in some way. So I'm just going to call this, for lack of a better word, subject lines, or like the first sentence. Okay, the first sentence. So a couple ideas on how to do this is like asking a question, like starting with a question to kind of get people thinking. Including a opinion or maybe like a surprising fact, like bringing in the element of surprise. Keeping your content short. Actually, I'm not even just going to say short. I'm going to just say succinct, because sometimes we need a little bit more leg room to share what we're trying to share, but making sure to keep it succinct. And then using humor, using puns. This is like, I'm thinking specifically of like email subject lines. This is a great place to use puns and humor and show off whatever your personality is. And here's one I would like you to avoid. I'm going to be sharing some specifics on avoiding, but here's one I could just think of when you're trying to start out getting people's interest. We don't need to getting interest is not using all caps and like all emojis. So when we do that, like I do find that can tend to blend in. So don't overdo it. I love caps and I love emojis for the right spots, but using all of those things can be less curiosity invoking and cause people to just kind of like stop before they even got started. And I think probably the biggest key when it comes down to creating curiosity is to really know who you're talking to. Like focus on them. Who are they? Who are you talking to? And why does this matter to them? So, when in doubt, when you're trying to sit down and create something and you do want to invoke that sense of curiosity, focus on the person you're speaking to. Step into their shoes. And if it makes it easier for you, focus on just kind of like one problem or one challenge that they're facing right now. Focus on one person. I love speaking like I'm just speaking to one other person on the other side, not envisioning like, oh my God, there's 7,000 people staring at me right now. Just speak to one person at a time and really put yourself into their shoes. I think that's a huge way to infuse curiosity, is to show that you're also really curious about them. You really care about them. You illuminate them, by being curious. Okay, this one we talked about a couple of weeks ago in the Content with Character podcast episode from April 2nd, and that is telling stories, using storytelling. I shared in that episode 4 really specific story ideas that you can tell in your business. But along the topic of storytelling, just like showing your human side, and telling your stories and really making yourself like relatable. I want to also say, like AI right now, where it stands, I don't love those as the way that we're bringing stories into our business. And I haven't yet seen that done well. So I want you to remember that like ChatGPT's stories or whatever you decide to use, they're not as good as your stories. Tell your stories. Show your human side. Make it relatable. Make it funny. Embrace your quirks, right? Personality and everyday life, like the mundane stuff that we think is super, super boring, or our quirks or our eccentricities. That stuff is interesting. That stuff is curiosity invoking because we can relate to it. And I just want you to embrace that. Like you are 1 in 8 billion. So showing that through your content is a way to get people, it's a way to help you stand out, and also to get people to lean in and be interested in what you're talking about, what you're sharing. The other one I love, and I alluded to this a little bit a couple minutes ago, is to offer fresh perspectives and insights. I don't love, and do whatever you want to do, but I don't love this trend right now of like calling things unpopular opinion, or people might come for me after sharing this. Like, you don't have to do that to share a fresh perspective and a fresh insight. You can just share your thoughts and ideas. And I do want to encourage you that not everyone is going to like what you share. Not everyone is going to like you, I don't think. And if they do, maybe you need to get honest with yourself and ask if you're being true to yourself and likable to yourself. But I love this concept of like, that is something that nobody else can copy from us, is our own fresh perspectives and insights, our own ideas. And it is a great way to create those conversations around curiosity, right? And like engage people in some of those concepts and some of those ideas. So I love that one, is sharing your fresh insights. Imagery, bringing imagery in can help to create curiosity when done right. To be honest with you, I don't know the first thing about this. I am terrible when it comes to imagery, but I would encourage you to check that out and like talk to somebody who really knows a lot about like imagery and content and that kind of thing, because that can really make or break. When you only have a minute to bring somebody in, it can really make or break their opportunity to lean in, right? Like if it just looks like everything else out there, or it's lots of stock photos, and trust me, my hand is raised because I've done this, but it can kind of keep things less interesting, let's just say. The other one, I talked about this a lot, but keeping things concise, doesn't have to be short, but we're just keeping in mind the attention span that people have for this one thing. So if it's a blog, you're going to have a little bit more leg room. If it's a podcast, you're going to have a little bit more leg room. If it's a social media post, you might want to make it a little bit more tidy, a little more to the point. But overall, no matter what we're sharing, let's focus on sticking to the point, and not kind of adding in all of these elements that might be confusing at the end of it. Okay, they might be confusing. Nothing kills curiosity like confusion. Another way I love bringing the element of curiosity into our content, into our marketing, is to give teasers, to give previews, if you like that word better, but kind of to say like, here's what I'm doing next. Here's what's coming next. And you hear me do that a lot on this podcast. I'll tell you like what I'm going to be talking about next week, or maybe something else you can get in on, right? But also summarizing. So summarizing, let's just say someone's listening to your content or to your podcast, let's just say, and they missed a couple of the points that you shared. So when we summarize, they can say, oh, I missed that, and I'm curious about it, so I'm going to go back and listen to it again. So teasers or previewing or summarizing, I think those are really good ways to keep people kind of curious. Like, here's what's coming, or here's what you missed, right? And are you curious about going back and getting in on it? And you can use that. I'm even thinking with like events. So like after the event happens, tell the story of what happened at the event, share the wins of the event, and get people curious for the next time that you're going to be doing it. So thinking that kind of through. And then I've kind of sprinkled them throughout, but I have 3 pretty distinct mistakes to avoid making when it comes to invoking a sense of curiosity in your content. Number 1 is using complex language or jargon. And I'm talking like, what is that? And even that can be a little bit complex, but just like things you say in your industry, or overused words or phrases, or talking in circles, like that can just get confusing, but it also can just shut down curiosity. So keeping the language plain, simple, straightforward, not getting kind of like in the weeds with the way that you're even using language. The second mistake too that I want to help you avoid is either too many details or being too mysterious. Now, I see this done in all sorts of ways, and I am often guilty of this myself, but when we're so super mysterious that people like don't know what to expect, or they don't know the next steps to take, or there's too many calls to action, it can be really, really hard, and we can give up or disconnect or disengage. I had a friend who he was creating this event, and he had a survey that you had to fill out in order to get like even the information for the tickets to the event. And the survey was supposed to be fun and silly, but honestly, it went on forever. And if it were not my friend and I wasn't like beta testing this, I would have given up after question number 5. I would have been like, no, thank you. They're asking me too many questions. I don't even know what to expect on the other side yet. This is all too mysterious. And it didn't spark my curiosity. It made me want to be like, it made me kind of put up my defenses a little bit. So thinking about that, like too many details can shut down curiosity, but also being a little too elusive can shut down curiosity. So you kind of want to find that nice balance, right? The third one, and this I say this throughout our content, and I try to remember to do this on this Content with Character podcast, is not leading the witness. So I don't want to tell you what you should think. I don't want to tell you what you should do. I want to open it up to you to decide for yourself. And I want, doing that allows you to kind of pull yourself along. Like you're sort of like, oh, now I do this. Now I'm going to try this. Now I'm going to experiment in this. Now I'm inspired to do this. But leading the witness is kind of like you're telling them exactly what you want them to think or what they should do, and not opening it up to them to be pulled in a certain place. It just kind of like shuts down a conversation. You know when somebody contradicts you and they're just like, well, that's the facts. And then you're like, okay, now I have nowhere to go from here, right? So this is really about like opening up to, what do you think? What are your thoughts and ideas on this? It's really letting them think for themselves. Okay, I know I gave you a lot, and so a couple things. First of all, there are going to be extended show notes for this week's episode. I wanted you to have this list that I just went through in just like a list form. And in doing so, this week I decided to try something a little bit different. I recently did a workshop on curiosity marketing, and so I already had this like list of resources on curiosity and curiosity marketing, and I decided to put those together for you in one place. So you have the show notes, you have all of these kind of episodes I mentioned, but I also created this like PDF for you. If you want to download it, you can kind of like work down your own little curiosity list about curiosity. I thought that would be fun. And one of them is actually an episode I did with my friend Kristen Messagey on the Life Uninhibited podcast. And we talked all about kind of like the difference between curiosity and sometimes how that can also be disguised or masked or misconstrued. So it was a really fascinating conversation, if I do say so myself. All right. Lastly, I just want to give you a few ideas on increasing your own curiosity. Like maybe you do tend a little bit towards that avoider and you're like, oh, I actually want to increase my own. I think that we're kind of all born with curiosity and creativity. Probably some of us more than others. And I'm not sure if like it can be taught. I would be curious about that. But I do think that we can create an environment for ourselves in which we encourage ourselves to keep following our curiosity. I also think it's a little bit like a muscle. So as you continue to work that muscle, it gets stronger and stronger and more versatile, right? And you can be more open-minded to new things and checking once you get the spark and feel the energy of it, once you get the desire to learn or explore new areas of knowledge or skills, then you're like, oh my God, I just have to keep cultivating this and fostering wherever it leads you. So we can choose to lean into our curiosity and grow those muscles, or we can kind of passively brush it to the side and stay right where we are. The choice is yours. There's no wrong or right decision. I'm not leading the witness. But do know that sometimes I've heard it said, once you unlock your own curiosity, you're going to have a really hard time turning back. And I think that that's okay, because cultivating curiosity in your own life has huge benefits. It benefits your relationships. It benefits your business, because it's coming from this place of like, well, I don't know everything and I need to find out what else there is to know. I want to learn about others and the world around me. I want to learn how to solve problems better. I want to learn how to solve different problems. I just have a desire to know. So you can see all of those different types of curiosity can really benefit your life in so many ways. So a couple ideas on cultivating it. And here's another fun thing. You could like gather a little group together and all work on these things together. It could be super fun, just saying. So number one is just like asking better questions. And I because better is a very elusive term, asking deeper questions, and not just asking the questions, but also listening, like becoming a better listener, becoming an active listener, and really listening to learn and to understand, not just to respond. It is so amazing to me. It is ever ceasingly amazing how much we can improve our relationships with other people by just simply getting curious about them, taking them out of the box that we put them in, asking them more questions, getting clarity, working together if there's a misunderstanding or miscommunication, and just like really prioritizing listening to their perspectives instead of just always sharing our own. The second idea for increasing or cultivating curiosity is to read. And that's not just read what you've always read, but read more widely and more deeply. I used to read like entirely, I'm going to call it self-help for lack of a better word, but I read so many like personal development books and self-help books. And I think it was about 2 years ago now, and I give a big shout out and big thanks to my friend Alicia Galati. I kind of stopped reading those books exclusively and started dabbling into the world of fiction. And it's not that I had never read a fiction book. I love fiction books, but I was just so focused on reading things that were going to better me, better my business, that I put fiction to the side. And so when I opened that up, I was like, oh my God, there's so much good stuff out there. So really opening yourself up to read more widely and more deeply when you do read. Savor it. Savor what you're reading. And don't read something you don't love. That's my other piece of advice. Okay, number 3 is to just kind of like slow down. Like, life is moving really, really fast. And if there is something that you're curious about, don't just say, oh, you know what, I'll do that later. Like, save it. Like, put a date in your calendar each week that you're like, I am just going to allow myself a few moments of curiosity at this time. Sometimes that might be putting your phone in the other room, right? Or saving a tab for like in a bookmark on your computer that you come back to read later, or really carving out that time for yourself. And then the last 2, I'm just going to lump into one, but one is like engaging in challenging tasks just for the sake of the experience or for the challenge, or just if that's not your flavor, just trying new things. I recently joined a book club. And I was like, I'm not going to like this. But I decided, you know what, I'll try anything once. And I joined it and I love it. I absolutely love it. And just last night, I decided to pick up like an opportunity to go bowling with my friends. Like, I just want to try new things, engage my body, engage my mind in new ways, take on new challenges, new experiences. So that's another way too. It's just like kind of push yourself out there to try something new, to increase your knowledge, to get involved in something like intellectual or creative, whatever floats your boat, but just trying something new. And then most of all, I think curiosity really should be fun. So but exploring things that make your curiosity come to life in a fun way. It's going to make you want to carve out that time. It's going to make you want to strengthen and cultivate those curiosity muscles. So have fun with it. And that's another thing for our curiosity marketing too, for our content, is having fun. When you're having fun, when you're engaged, when you're writing from a place or sharing from a place that you're interested and excited by, it tends to come through in what you're sharing, and people tend to be more interested in it, excited by it, curious in it. Okay? So that is today's episode. Next week's episode, contrary to Flight of the Conchords, if you're familiar with the song, the humans are not dead. We're going to talk about how being human is your secret sauce. And I'm going to kind of compare it a little bit to this whole AI thing, this whole humans versus the robots, right? So we're going to talk about why it's really important to bring that human touch, that human air to your copy, your content, your brand messaging, and like tangibly, what is that? What is it? So that's where we're going next week. I hope I have piqued your curiosity, and I'll chat with you then. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Content with Character. If you loved the episode, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast, rate, review, and share it with someone else you know it could help. For more content and visibility tips, visit my blog at emilyaborn.com, and be sure to connect with me on Instagram at Emily Aborn. I'd love to hear how this inspired you to take action.